The faint hum of a dying generator echoed through the narrow alleyways as Alex leaned against the crumbling brick wall of his apartment. The morning air was thick and acrid, tainted by the faint smell of smoke. Something wasn't right. It had started the night before, a blackout that lasted hours, followed by strange sounds in the distance, like a low growl that reverberated through the city streets. Alex tightened his grip on the crowbar he had picked up from the supply closet in his building. His gaze swept across the street below, which was eerily still, save for the occasional movement of litter tumbling in the wind. Usually, by this time, the city would be alive with people rushing to work, cars honking in a chorus of impatience. Now, it was a ghost town. The radio on his desk crackled, static giving way to fragmented words. Stay indoors, avoid contact. Infected, quarantine. The signal cut out as abruptly as it had come, leaving an oppressive silence in its wake. What the hell is going on? Alex muttered under his breath. He had stayed up most of the night, trying to make sense of the chaos outside. Social media had been flooded with grainy videos of people attacking one another, their movements jerky and unnatural. Some said it was a new drug. Others whispered about biological experiments gone wrong. Unable to bear the uncertainty, Alex decided to investigate. He threw on his jacket, tucked the crowbar into his belt, and stepped out of his apartment. The hallway was deserted, the doors to his neighbors' apartments ominously ajar. He peered into one unit, only to find overturned furniture and traces of blood smeared across the walls. Descending the stairs, Alex felt his pulse quicken. He reached the lobby and cautiously pushed open the front door. The sunlight outside felt unnatural, filtered through a grayish haze that cast long, distorted shadows. A muffled sound caught his attention. Across the street, a man stumbled out of a convenience store, his movements erratic. Alex called out, "Hey, are you okay?" The man turned toward him, and Alex's stomach churned. His face was pale, eyes bloodshot and unfocused, lips stained with something dark and viscous. The man let out an unnatural shriek and charged toward Alex with staggering speed. Instinct took over. Alex raised the crowbar just in time, swinging it with all his strength. The metal connected with the man's head, sending him crumpling to the ground. Alex staggered back, his hands trembling. "What the—" Alex's voice trailed off as he noticed more figures emerging from the shadows, their movements unnervingly similar to the man he had just encountered. They seemed drawn to him, their heads twitching as they focused on his position. Realizing the danger, Alex bolted back into his building and slammed the door shut. His mind raced as he ascended the stairs two at a time. Whatever these people were, they weren't normal. Something was changing them, twisting them into aggressive, mindless predators. Back in his apartment, Alex barricaded the door with a bookshelf and sank into a chair, his chest heaving. His thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the window. He froze, gripping the crowbar tightly as he turned toward the sound. To his relief, it wasn't another infected person. It was Kevin, the building's janitor, a wiry man in his late 40s. Kevin's face was pale, his eyes wide with fear. "Let me in," he hissed, glancing nervously over his shoulder. Alex unlatched the window and helped Kevin climb inside. "What's going on out there?" Alex demanded. Kevin shook his head, sweat dripping from his brow. "I don't know, man. It's like people are going crazy, biting, attacking like rabid animals. I barely made it out of the grocery store alive." The two men sat in tense silence for a moment, the weight of the situation pressing down on them. Kevin pulled a pocket knife from his jacket and placed it on the table. "If we're going to survive this, we need to stick together," he said grimly. Alex nodded, though his mind was still reeling. He stared out the window, watching the infected wander aimlessly through the streets below. Their behavior was erratic, but there was something almost coordinated about the way they moved in groups, as if they were being guided by an unseen force. "What do you think caused this?" Alex asked. Kevin hesitated before responding. "I heard rumors about some artifact. They dug it up outside the city a few weeks ago. said it was ancient, but nobody really knew what it was. Maybe this is connected. Alex frowned. An artifact? It sounded ridiculous, but then again, so did everything else that had happened in the past 24 hours. He didn't have time to dwell on it. The infected were growing in number, their growls echoing through the streets like a chorus of doom. "We can't stay here," Alex said finally. "This building isn't safe. We need to find a better shelter. Maybe some more supplies." Kevin agreed, though his expression was one of doubt. "You got a plan?" Alex glanced at the crowbar in his hand and the limited supplies scattered around his apartment. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. "We stick to the alleys. Avoid open spaces. Head toward the industrial district. It's less populated, might be safer." As the two men prepared to leave, a loud crash from the hallway made them freeze. Something, or someone, was trying to get in. Alex tightened his grip on the crowbar, his heart pounding in his chest. "Whatever happens," he said quietly, "we don't stop moving." Kevin nodded, and together they stepped into the hallway, ready to face the horrors waiting beyond the door. The air was heavy with smoke and ash as Alex and Kevin crept through the back alleys of the city. Every shadow seemed to shift, every sound a potential threat. The once familiar streets were now unrecognizable, a labyrinth of overturned vehicles, shattered glass, and the occasional guttural groans of the infected echoing in the distance. "Stay close," Alex whispered, gripping the crowbar tightly. Kevin, clutching his pocket knife, nodded, his face pale and drenched in sweat. The industrial district was only a few blocks away, but each step felt like a gamble. As they turned a corner, Alex froze. Ahead, a group of infected milled about, their heads twitching as if sniffing the air. Their grotesque forms were silhouetted against the flickering light of a distant fire. Alex motioned for Kevin to duck behind a dumpster. "What now?" Kevin hissed, his voice barely audible. Alex scanned the area, formulating a plan. "We go around. Stay low. Stay quiet." They moved cautiously, skirting the edge of the alley. Alex's heart pounded as they passed within feet of the infected. One of them let out a low growl, its head snapping in their direction. The two men froze, barely daring to breathe. After what felt like an eternity, the creature turned away and they pressed on. Reaching the edge of the alley, they found themselves at the entrance to a small convenience store. The front windows were shattered, the shelves inside ransacked. "We need supplies," Alex said, motioning for Kevin to follow. Inside, the store was eerily quiet, save for the faint dripping of water from a broken pipe. The two men quickly scavenged what they could: cans of food, bottled water, and a flashlight with weak batteries. "Better than nothing," Kevin muttered, stuffing the items into his backpack. As they prepared to leave, a sudden noise from the back room made them both jump. Alex raised his crowbar, his eyes locked on the door. "Stay behind me," he whispered. The door creaked open and a man stumbled out, his face gaunt and hollow-eyed. For a moment, Alex thought he was infected, but the man raised his hands in surrender. Don't hit me," he stammered. "Who are you?" Alex demanded, not lowering his weapon. "Name's Rick," the man said, his voice trembling. "I've been hiding here since it all started. Thought you were one of them." After a tense moment, Alex lowered the crowbar. "We're heading to the industrial district. You're welcome to come if you can keep up." Rick hesitated, glancing nervously at the street outside. "You sure it's safe?" "It's safer than staying here," Alex replied. Reluctantly, Rick joined them, and the trio set off once more. The streets grew darker as they moved closer to the industrial zone. The infected were more numerous now, their movements more coordinated. "What's wrong with them?" Rick asked in a hushed tone as they were behind a burned-out car, watching a group of infected shamble past. Kevin glanced at Alex, then spoke. "It's the artifact. Something about it is changing them, making them smarter." Rick's eyes widened. "Artifact? What artifact?" "It doesn't matter," Alex said curtly. What matters is surviving. The conversation ended abruptly as a loud crash echoed nearby. One of the infected had spotted them and let out a piercing shriek, alerting the others. "Run!" Alex shouted, bolting down the street with Kevin and Rick close behind. The infected swarmed after them, their grotesque forms moving with unnatural speed. The chase was a blur of pounding footsteps and frantic breaths. Alex led them into a narrow alley, hoping to lose their pursuers. At the end of the alley, a rusted fire escape offered a slim chance of escape. "Climb!" Alex yelled, boosting Kevin up. Rick followed, his movements clumsy with panic. Alex scrambled up last, pulling himself onto the roof just as the infected reached the base of the fire escape. The creatures snarled and clawed at the metal ladder, their shrieks filling the night air. Alex looked around, searching for an exit. The rooftop stretched across several buildings, offering a precarious path to safety. "This way," Alex said, leading the group across the rooftops. The infected followed below, their cries relentless. As they reached the final building, Alex spotted a fire ladder leading to the ground. "We can use that to get down," he said. "No way," Rick protested. "They'll catch us the second we hit the ground." "We don't have a choice," Alex replied, already making his way down. Reluctantly, Rick and Kevin followed. The group hit the ground running, weaving through the maze of industrial warehouses. The infected were close behind, their numbers growing. Up ahead, Alex spotted a large factory with reinforced doors. "There," he shouted, leading the group inside. They slammed the doors shut and barricaded them with whatever they could find. Metal beams, crates, and machinery. For the moment, they were safe. The factory was dark and cavernous, its walls lined with rusted machinery and broken equipment. The air was heavy with the smell of oil and decay. "What now?" Rick asked, his voice shaky. Alex sank to the floor, catching his breath. "We rest. Then we figure out our next move." Kevin nodded, though his face was etched with worry. "They're getting stronger," he said quietly. "Smarter. It's like they know we're here." Alex didn't respond. He stared at the door, listening to the distant growls of the horde outside. The thought lingered in his mind. This wasn't just survival anymore. There was something bigger at play, something far more sinister than they could imagine. The faint hum of machinery filled the factory's cavernous halls, an unsettling counterpoint to the distant growls of the infected outside. Alex paced near the barricaded doors, his thoughts racing. Rick sat slumped against a rusted conveyor belt, his hands trembling as he held a crowbar scavenged from the debris. Kevin knelt by a nearby workbench, examining the tools and scraps scattered across its surface. "This isn't going to hold forever," Kevin muttered, glancing at the makeshift barricade. Alex stopped pacing and looked at him. "We need to come up with a plan. If they break in, we're done." Rick let out a bitter laugh. "Plan? There's no plan, man. We're outnumbered, outmatched. Those things, they're not just mindless anymore. They're hunting us. Then we give them something to hunt," Alex snapped, his voice steely. "We make our stand here." Kevin stood, holding up a length of pipe he had reinforced with duct tape and nails. "He's right. We can't outrun them anymore. But if we're smart, we can fight them off." Alex's mind raced as he surveyed their surroundings. The factory was filled with potential weapons and defenses, chains, steel beams, welding torches. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. "Let's fortify this place," Alex said, his voice firm. "We use everything we can to make it a death trap to those things." The three men worked quickly, their fear driving them. Kevin rigged a series of crude tripwires, using spare chains and pulleys, setting them up near the entrances. Rick stacked crates and barrels into barricades, creating choke points to funnel the infected into narrow corridors. Alex fashioned a makeshift spear from a broken metal rod and a sharp piece of scrap. As they worked, the growls outside grew louder. The infected were gathering, their movements increasingly deliberate. Alex glanced through a crack in the barricade and felt a chill run down his spine. Dozens of them were clustered around the factory, their bloodshot eyes fixed on the building. "They're waiting," Alex said, his voice low. Kevin looked up from his work. "Waiting for what?" Alex didn't answer. The infected shouldn't have been capable of this kind of behavior. Coordinated, strategic. It was as if something was controlling them, guiding them. "Maybe it's the artifact," Rick said suddenly, his voice tinged with fear. "If it's really causing this, maybe they're connected to it somehow. Like a hive mind." Alex didn't want to believe it, but the evidence was hard to ignore. "Whatever it is," he said, "we have to hold them off. If we can survive the night, maybe we'll have a chance to figure this out." The first attack came just after nightfall. A guttural howl pierced the air, followed by the sound of pounding footsteps. The infected swarmed the factory, their bodies slamming against the barricades with feral intensity. "Here they come," Alex shouted, gripping his spear. The barricades held for a few minutes, but the sheer force of the horde was overwhelming. One of the tripwires snapped, triggering a cascade of falling debris that crushed several of the infected, but more kept coming. Kevin swung his makeshift weapon with precision, taking down an infected that had breached the side door. Rick fought clumsily but with desperation, his crowbar striking wildly at anything that moved. Alex held his ground near the main entrance, thrusting his spear into the chest of an infected man. The creature shrieked and collapsed, but two more took its place. "They're breaking through," Rick yelled, retreating toward the center of the factory. "Fall back to the second barricade," Alex ordered. The three men regrouped, using the narrow corridors to their advantage. The infected came in waves, their movements erratic but relentless. The air was filled with the sound of metal striking flesh, the acrid stench of blood, and sweat choking their lungs. As the horde thinned, a new sound emerged, a low, resonant hum that seemed to emanate from the infected themselves. Alex froze, his grip tightening on the spear. "What is that?" Kevin asked, his voice shaky. Before Alex could respond, the infected began to move differently. They spread out, circling the men with a predatory precision that was horrifying to watch. "They're learning," Alex said, his voice barely above a whisper. The fight resumed, more brutal than before. Alex drove his spear through one infected's throat, only to be tackled by another. Kevin pulled him free, using the pipe to smash the creature's skull. Rick, separated from the others, screamed as he was dragged down by three infected. Alex tried to reach him, but it was too late. Rick's cries were cut short, his body disappearing beneath the mass of clawing hands and snapping jaws. "Alex, we have to go," Kevin shouted, pulling him toward a staircase leading to the upper level. They retreated to a metal catwalk overlooking the factory floor. Below, the infected swarmed, their numbers seemingly endless. "This can't be it," Kevin said, his voice filled with despair. Alex scanned the factory, his mind racing. His eyes fell on a massive gas tank near the far wall. It was risky, but it was their only chance. "We're taking them all out," Alex said, grabbing a welding torch from a nearby shelf. Kevin's eyes widened. "You're insane. You will blow us up too. Do you have a better idea?" Alex snapped. Kevin hesitated, then nodded grimly. "What do you need?" "Cover me," Alex said, descending the stairs. He moved quickly, dodging the infected as he made his way toward the gas tank. Kevin provided what little support he could, hurling debris to distract the horde. Reaching the tank, Alex ignited the welding torch and jammed it into the metal. The tank hissed as gas began to leak out, the smell overwhelming. "Get to the roof!" Alex shouted, sprinting back toward Kevin. The two men climbed a ladder to the rooftop just as the tank ignited. The explosion was deafening, a blinding fireball consuming the factory and the infected within. The force of the blast knocked them off their feet. Alex lay on the roof, gasping for air as debris rained down around them. When the smoke cleared, the factory was a smoldering ruin, and the infected were gone. Kevin sat up, coughing. "Did we win?" Alex stared at the wreckage below. For now. But deep down, he knew this wasn't the end. Whatever had caused the outbreak was still out there, and it was only a matter of time before it returned.